Is that baby yours?
Everyone should have a story to tell.
As of 2010, 12 years ago, it's showing that most paternity test labs report that about 1/3 of their paternity tests have a negative result. So that means that there's a third of guys walking around who are not the father of their children. Now, I came across some interesting conversations where they were asking, it was just a group, and they were discussing should paternity test be mandatory at birth. And being on both sides of the gender spectrum, or seeing both sides of the gender spectrum, it was very interesting how the conversation went. Um, Most of the guys were like yes, and most of the women were like no. And my thought is, I side with the guys, yes, but not for the sake of I need to know. It's for the sake of the child. For the sake of the child, they should know who their biological parents are. Now, if the other parent, who is the biological father, wants nothing to do with it, and the man who's there already is willing to raise the child, that's great. But the reason I think that it works is because you get it all out of the way. There's no anonymity. There's no question. You can't have family members come in and say, "Well, she was messing with such and such before." Get it out of the way, and if it's legal, if it's made legal, I think that there's an upside to it. So it takes out the what could be created as a distrust by a man asking for a test. So if it's just mandatory, this is just what we do in the hospital, or this is just the law, then there's not a rift between the new parents. They can focus on raising the baby, and if not, then this man who thought that he was having a child is not on the hook to be emotionally and financially invested if he chooses not to be. It's only fair. Now, I understand that there's a lot of different circumstances. So they were talking about, well, what if they're married? And one guy said, I would still do it. Another guy said, I wouldn't. My thing is more when you are not married. I think when you're married, you already have things that you have together already. You have joint assets. I don't think that a lot of men would stay, but I think it's different than when you're just talking about somebody you're socially, acquainted with, and they come up pregnant. I think that that's probably a little bit more important because you don't have a stable home for this baby to come into. You both individually may have your things going on, but at least in the case of a married couple, they can bring a child into a home that they've already built and are expecting. So a lot of times when you've got single, woman and single guy, and then there's a scramble. Okay, there's kind of a crib set up here. There's some, there's a bassinet over here, and then stuff like that. So it gets a little more messy. So before you get too involved, I would say that that would certainly be one of those things to look into. Now, I did do a video called What in the Roe versus Wade, and it goes into how I handled somebody that I had a very, very casual encounter with, coming back and telling me that she was pregnant. I will link that one at the end of this video. You can check it out, and you can see how I handled it, and a lot of times it won't be agreed with from different viewpoints, and I can respect both of those. I can only speak as a man's viewpoint, and anybody who wants to comment, let's do it respectfully, and add your experiences, your advice, your comments, any of that stuff. It all helps. But I don't want to call it a pandemic, but it is a problem. It is a problem, and it's not to say that all women are cheaters or this or that. It just says that women do have options as far as sexual partners, and if they are exercising them, that's fine. I'm not here to hold anybody against that or stitch a scarlet letter onto somebody, but what I am saying is that if that's the case and you are not telling the other person, that's your business as well. But that baby deserves to know. Plus, the other man deserves to know. If he doesn't choose to be involved, that's fine. But all adult parties or all participating parties in sexual activity should know. And it's the same with, an STD. If somebody comes up with something that they can spread or pass on to somebody, other people should know. Does that always happen? No, but that's how it should be. So when I say it should be, getting back to the paternity, I get that a disease is possibly different than a child because some aren't going to be permanent where children are, but it still speaks to people taking accountability for their actions. Look, if you're having sex with anybody for any duration of time and even with or without protection, you can say that you are running the risk of two things: disease and pregnancy. And that's just how it is. So, we know birth control will fail sometimes, or protection can fail sometimes. So, again, a pregnancy or a disease are two things that you are almost inherently facing, or you should be prepared to accept, I should say. Um, yes, the child deserves to know. And if you do it right off the bat, then there is no anonymity to it. There is no question or whatever. And it doesn't completely destroy a man who's put everything into his life, as far as raising a child. Now, adoption, step parenting, foster parenting are all wonderful things, but those are things that are done with the actual knowledge of going in and saying, I recognize that this is not my biological child. It's different. So some of the pushback that the women were saying was, well, women do it all the time. Yes, but when they go to an adoption agency, they're very aware. And the imbalance to this whole debate is women always know that the baby that comes out of them is their child. So there's an old saying, mama's baby, daddy maybe. Let the guy know. Now, I have my own kids. I broached that question, and then when it came time to actually have the kids and they came out looking just like me, I left it alone. And could that be to my detriment? Yes, and it could be a lot of guys' detriments. But I've also been of the mind that children, no matter what, across the board, also just need adults to love them and help rear them. It takes a village. So I was okay with my decision. A lot of guys may not be, and I wasn't being, angled for child support. I wasn't being angled. I didn't have like a drama to my circumstance. So I was very comfortable in saying, you know what, with or without a paternity test, I'm here and this is all good. Now, had I found out at the time, would I have felt differently? Maybe, but that's the old me, and here we are, and my kids are my kids no matter what. So, what are your thoughts? Should this be a thing where the government steps in? Now, that's the other thing. One of the women was saying, "Well, I don't want the government involved in that sort of thing because we already have too many other problems to take care of, and that shouldn't be one of them when it's your personal business." The problem is with a lot of that is that child support from the actual fathers actually does help pay, for the rearing of for the rearing of their children if they choose to pay it or if they are made aware, and therefore it takes some burden off of the public services that a lot of women sign up for because they aren't getting money. So um, there is that to consider, and I don't know how that works completely, so maybe I'm speaking out of pocket, and I know for every state there's always seemingly something different, but I would think that you would just want to know and participate. But if you didn't, then at least the government would know who to go after for child support, whether they chose to be involved in the child's life or not. Then where was I? There's also the them say, well, then you should have to pay for the paternity test. Okay, maybe insurance covers part of it, and then you pick up the remaining amount, or there's going to be government programs to help this. That's cool. Me personally, if that was the case and I wasn't sure and I wasn't vested into the person having my child, I would pay to know now rather than pay how much more later on down the line. And not to mention fighting to get out of something in court, in family court, if you go, because then you got to file all these papers if you've been put on child support. Then you have to go back and prove it. So just an interesting topic, kind of hot button. So I thought I would run it by you guys, see what you think. Please, again, constructive comments, experiences. I don't know like how much feedback will generate a change in totality, but just seeing that almost 30% of guys walking around don't know that they aren't the father of their children, that's a little staggering. And before it comes down to, well, it's a woman's right, or maybe he shouldn't be sleeping around, or this or that. Would you want this for your father, your brother, your sons? Would you want this, them going through not knowing? Because that's a really hard question, and it makes it really hard to be fully invested with a child if you're not sure. I agree, children just need love, and maybe just with them knowing, they can still accept that. But I think the bigger part is we often want to disconnect from people who lie and knowingly look to continually deceive us. Just something to think about. So again, hopefully this content is of some interest, a little different, maybe something that we can venture down every once in a while. If you like it, please, again, in the comments, feel free to click the subscribe, hit the like and notifications, and hopefully this finds everybody in good health and spirits. Peace, love, unity, solidarity.